This here is an Asus ProArt PX613. It's been kind of annoying with the audio drivers and that kind of stuff, but has nothing to do with that. What this video is about here is we have the brand new, at least in the West, AMD Ryzen Max 388. It's a STRIX HALO CPU. It's the only laptop that has it in the West right now. It's going to be coming out in a lot of handhelds. 1X Player, for example, is redoing a few of their handhelds with this chip. This is a much more logical chip than the STRIX HALO 395. My issue with the 395 is it has a 16-core processor. 16 cores is too many cores on a CPU for a laptop like a thin and light like this and a handheld. It's way too many cores. It's great for a mini PC. I guess for a big gaming laptop it's okay. But this one here, they've cut down the cores to 8 instead of 16. The CPU is not as performant as the 395, but it doesn't matter. It's still very performant. So you go from 40,000 in Cinebench, now you're down 20,000. Still very performant, still faster than my gaming laptop. That CPU is faster than my gaming laptop. And that gaming laptop has a 5070 Ti with it. And I do all my video editing on it. It's more than enough. In a handheld and a thin and light laptop, this CPU is far more than enough. So we're just going to do pragmata testing here. We don't need to do anything beyond that for this video. I'm going to have a ton of tests on this chip because there's just really not a lot out there. There's like nothing. Actually, I looked on YouTube and there was actually nothing. So what I want to do for the actual settings here, I'm actually going to turn it down so it's not too high. So we could do balanced and 8 gigabytes. This GPU would be fine with 8 gigabytes, but I want to make sure that there's for sure absolutely no chance of a VRAM limit. There's not going to be. Okay, so we're in the game now. It's not going to run fantastic at this many watts, but it should be okay. Now the VRAM, you can allocate what you want. Like this is a 32 gigabyte system. I could give more to the VRAM. I just gave you 8. But it's not about that right now. We could turn the settings up, we could turn it down. What I care about here is the relative performance, not the absolute performance, the relative. We will test the VRAM later in other videos to get absolute performance. Okay, let's just have a quick look at the results here. There's going to be a long section after this where I actually do the recording part, but I figured I'll put in the graphs here and then you can watch me actually do it and observe in real time and I talk about it. But here's just the graph here, the results. Watts 13 up to 65. It wouldn't let me go below 13, at least in this game. I was able to get it to go to 13 in a much simpler game, but I just don't think it likes it. FPS, which is the average, 1% lows, 0.1% lows. Average is, what you're actually seeing on the screen overall. 1% lows and especially 0.1% lows, that's representative of kind of like micro stutter. If that's too low, it'll be really choppy. Okay. Numbers here on the left, so you can just kind of see the absolute numbers as we go along. Because here at 65 watts, the average, we're looking at approximately 113, plus minus, a couple, depending on what's going on in the scene, but around 113. Then dropping all the way down to 55 watts, so coming way down to 55 watts. So 65 down to 55 watts, it's a 10 watt drop, quite a bit. And we can see here that there's not really much of a performance drop. We're maybe like a frame or two, right? So not even 2%, maybe like 1.5%. So really nothing and no change to the 1% lows, 0.1% lows. So this lines up with what I found on the STRIX HALO 395, where the peak GPU wattage, GPU performance was 55. There was no point in going above that. You would get CPU performance, but it didn't do anything else for the GPU. Interestingly here, then when you go down to 50 watts, so that's another 5 watts down, we're only looking at, a couple frames down. So we're at about 106 down here, which is pretty sweet. 106 down here, average, and we're looking at essentially the exact same lows. Technically, it actually went up, but it's just whatever. So I'd consider that essentially almost the same performance. A frame or two down, averages could be depending on what's going on in the scene, and the lows are identical. So really, even 50 watts, I'd consider basically the same performance. So anything like this is just extra watts. If you go from 50, 55, all the way up to 65, so you're adding 15 watts, you're not really gaining any performance. So 50 watts is what I'd consider, that's probably where you're going to want to be at as a peak. It doesn't really do much to go beyond that. Dropping down another 5 watts down to 45, we start to see some performance drop. So we're finally losing some performance. We're dropping down to about 100 here. So it's not as much as you think. We're still only losing about 4%. It's pretty impressive, 45 watts. Now the lows do come down. We do get a little bit of a drop in the lows, 76, 56, which I would still consider incredible. When your lows are around 60, 0.1% lows, that's awesome performance. Dropping down to 45, again, another linear decrease in performance. We're still at 93. Lows are still very good. All the way down to 35 over here. 35, we're still at 90 FPS. Now again, this is not the most demanding settings. That's still crazy for an iGPU. And we're still doing very well, right? Like it may look very dramatic on this blue line here because like it looks like it's coming down, but we went from 65 watts down to 35 watts and we only lost about 20, 21 FPS, which in terms of percentages is not as much as you think. It might be like a 20% performance for way fewer watts. The averages are also quite good here, right? 35 watts, we're still at 70. So you can see that the lows are not really changing much. That's what's really impressive. The average does come down, but the lows are what you feel honestly a lot more than the average. That's important. Down to 30 watts. And you can see here, we're still on a pretty gentle curve here. You can see that curve's pretty gentle on the lows. At 30 watts over here, we're still at 65 and 52. So that's very good. Now the average again did come down, but we're still at 90, which is still very good. Now we drop down to 25. That's when we start to see a much more aggressive drop off, right? As you can see the curve, it became into a much more aggressive curve here. We're still at 60, above 60 FPS for the average, which is awesome. And the lows are still quite good, 56 and 46, but it is a more aggressive drop off. Dropping down to 20, and now we're seeing an even more aggressive. You can see the angle, right? It starts to really drop off there, becomes a much more aggressive curve, but we're still at 46. I mean, still very playable. And the lows are still very good, right? But it's getting more aggressive. Down to 17, it's a big drop from 20 to 17, considering that's only a 3 wattage difference. That's the most aggressive drop we've seen so far. We're down to 17, we're 30, 37 FPS. 37 FPS, still very playable, honestly, still good. And lows are still good, 25, 23, so you can absolutely play at 17. But then when you start to go down from there, it actually drops off less aggressively. It's also less wattage drop, but overall like 17 to 13, that's a 5 wattage drop again there, right? You can see that's another 5 wattage drop there. And we went from 37 all the way down to 23. So at that point, I'd consider it pretty much unplayable. 15 is kind of, I put it in here because 15 is the sweet spot where it's like, it's 30 FPS. It's still, Nintendo Switch 2 type playable, Series S type playable, still very good. Below that 13 watts, I don't consider that playable in this game. Other games, it'll run fine. So generally speaking, you can see here, once you get to around 30 watts and above that, it does start to level off, right? You're not gaining as much performance as you might think by adding more watts. 30 to 35 watts, really quite a good sweet spot for the handhelds where, the curve is pretty aggressive until you get up to about that 35 watts. And then it does start to level off. The average creeps up a little bit, but the lows really start to level off there at 35 watts. So that's really what I'm going to say there. When you get to that 35 watts, it's much, 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 much more linear. It's much, much, much more gentle in terms of what you're adding. So, if we see a lot of handhelds coming out with the STRIX HALO 388 here, I really do think that it's going to perform quite well at those 30 watts. 30 to 35 watts is going to be a pretty good sweet spot for handhelds. Typically, they're pretty easy to cool at 30, 35 watts. Yes, there is quite a big drop off as you go down to those lower watts, 17, 20, to a lesser extent, even 25, but it's still very performant. So, those extra cores that on the 395 can be hungry, and I'm not seeing quite as much of that on the 388 here. So very good results here. It does give me some hope to see this chip in a handheld, and you're going to get some really impressive results here. Okay, so now let's actually just do some good old wattage scaling here. So let's go to an area that you can see. Let's go like maybe that, so you can see that a little bit easier. Go like that. Right. We're doing it here because it's a pretty challenging scene here. Right, so we'll just keep like that. Okay. So now we're at 50. We can go higher actually. So we'll go up a little bit here. I'll go this one. Let's go 55. So at 55, we'll give it a sec. It takes a second each time for it to kind of sort itself out. So at 55, we're going to be around 109, 110, somewhere around there. Okay. Just give it 109. It'll bounce around a little bit depending on what's going on. Go up a little bit higher. Go up to 60. And you'll see there's no difference here. This is why I'm doing this. There's no real difference. Like stuff going on in the background. A few frames, I guess, technically, like 2, 3. Right, so a couple frames more. Let's go up just a little bit more. Oops, that's the wrong one. Okay. Right? It's not really doing anything anymore. Right now we're up to 65, and we're basically the same. So 65 is, it's from my testing, is around the plateau. Adding more watts doesn't do anything for the GPU, like at all. Right? There's a little bit of static stuff, like non-static stuff going on here. So, you know, plus minus a couple a little bit, but I want to give it a challenging scene. I could do just benchmark runs, but that's so synthetic that I don't like it. Okay, so that's 65. Oops. We'll come down here. Let's go down to 55. So we were at about 109, which is our peak in this exact scene. So at 55, we are dropping off here, right? But like maybe a frame. This is what I saw before. It's like maybe a frame or two. So 55 is about what I'm seeing as a peak on the GPU. Now that does make sense because on the AMD 395, I also found 55 to be the peak. In gaming, potentially the CPU can do more, but in gaming, it didn't do anything else. The CPU, once it had 55, it didn't add anything to add more watts. That was the peak, which makes sense. You're just starting to feed the core. The GPU has been extracted and give it what it wants. So that's 109. Let's come down a little bit further. Man, I'm gonna get the hang of the software eventually. Okay, so that was 109. Now we're down to 50. There will be a performance drop now. Again, but it's not staggering, right? We're down a few frames. What are we going to sit at here? I think it'll sit around 105 when it's done. Right? So we're down 5%, not even, maybe 4, maybe even 3. 3 or 4%, put it that way, for 5 watts, all the way from 65. Right? Because 55 is kind of the peak. Okay. Let's go like that. We'll come down again. I'm just doing intervals of 5 because it would be ridiculous otherwise. Okay. Now we have started to drop off, but it's still very respectable, right? We're down around 10% from the peak, 55, with 10 watts. But, I mean, we're still getting very good frames here. Now, this game does not have FSR4, unfortunately. There are a lot of games that have FSR4, and FSR4 is coming to the STRIX HALO. It may actually already be out on these. So, with FSR4 support, that means that you are going to get considerably better scaling, meaning you can use more of it. So you can turn up settings and get away with it. Or, when we get to the lower watts and things start to get a little hectic for the performance, you can just use more scaling and get away with it. Okay, so we're doing really well here. I mean, we're not losing much. It'll start to drop off now. This is now 40 watts, right? 55 was our peak in terms of GPU performance at 109. Now we're down to 40. 15 watts lower from our peak, and we're down around 15 frames. So it's pretty linear, to be honest, actually, in this exact scenario. But it's respectable, right? We're down a ton of watts here. This is now like 55. A lot of the STRIX HALO handhelds do, you can give them 55, but you know that's gonna go through. You're not gonna play on battery like that. You get like an hour and maybe an hour of gameplay. Plugged into the wall, sure, of course you could. Like the Apex, the 1X player Apex. The problem is when you started lowering the watts on those handhelds with the Strix Halo 395, they started to get really sketchy. Whereas Intel was like, I'm good, man. I can go, love to be at 20 watts. The Intel one, 25, 20 watts. Whereas the Strix Halo was like, I do not want to be down that low. It started to really choke. Okay, we'll come down. The reason I'm kind of like chatting between things is I want it to take a second to sort itself out because it takes a little while for the power scaling. Okay, now we're down to 35 watts, which is like Legion Go S, ROGL, ROGL might go higher, but like the Legion Go S, this kind of stuff, they usually sit around 35 as their peak. And look at us now. Yes, we are down. We went from 109-ish, now down we're 89, but we're at 89 at 35 watts. That is very respectable handheld performance. Or thin light laptop. Now, consider the fact that I, for example, have a 1X Player X2 and a 1X Player 3, both with Lunar Lake. They only go to 35, and you know so the cooling is typically designed in these handhelds for built 35. They can potentially do more, but most handhelds are happy to cool 35. Once you go beyond that, they start to get loud. Of course, your battery dies faster, but even if you're plugged in, I don't care about battery. I'm plugged in. They start to get loud. Performance is still very good. Let's go down a little further. Now we're into like, you know, you have a handheld and you want to keep it quiet, you want to keep performance up, but you want longer battery. So now we're starting to drop off in performance, but again, we're still at 79, 30 watts. The laptop is now, is there sound? The fans are on, but I can't hear them really. 54 degrees, right? So the fans are just like, they're just idly spinning basically. Very respectable. Okay, so most of the time when I play on my handheld, whatever the handheld is, I'm typically at 30 or below. Even if they do 35, like my Legion Go S behind me, I don't want it to be above 30 because it's loud and it irritates me. So even when I'm on wall power, I'm like, I'm good with 30, 25. Now we're at 25. This is most of the time when I game on my handhelds, or in the future when I game on this laptop on battery, it'll be at 25. Even when I'm not on battery, it's just typically these things run so quiet. My Legion Go S, which is just slightly out of reach here, I always game at 25, even though it can do more, because I don't want to hear it. It drives me crazy. I don't like to use headphones when I'm gaming for long sessions. I just want my laptop to be quiet, my handheld to be quiet. And at 25, most handhelds, any handheld that I've used, can keep itself pretty damn quiet at 25 watts. And we're still above 60. STRIX HALO 395 started to really chug at 25 and below, especially below 25. It was like, I don't want to be here. It wanted more watts because there's all those cores, right? Let's come down further. Now we're getting into like low watts, right? 20. This is getting close to like Steam Deck watts. Now we're seeing a pretty big performance drop. But again, it's 48 FPS. When I play, this will give you an example. I've said it before. Hogwarts Legacy on the Legion Go, actually, to be honest, on Legion Go, but especially the PS5 and the Series X, both of them, I put it on what's called balance mode. It doesn't go at 30, it doesn't go at 60, it goes right in the middle at 45 because it balances fidelity and performance. And 45 is a huge jump from 30. Huge jump. I don't like to play games at 30 unless it's like a point and click or something, or like a tactical. I don't like to play at 30. It makes me actually motion sick. 45, I have no problems at all. No problems. And 60, I mean, it's good, but the jump from 30 to 45 is considerably more noticeable than 45 to 60. Considerably more. So this is running really well, to be honest, in my opinion. It's actually, it keeps bouncing around a little bit. Now we're going to come down a little bit more. We'll go with like an intermediate. 17 was like really where I found the STRIX HALO was like, I'm dying. And Panther Lake was very fast at 17. But here, look at that. 35 FPS. Very playable. This is the same, like Nintendo Switch games nowadays, Switch 2. They're like, it's pretty rare to find a Switch 2 game that runs at 60. They're all locked to 30, which is kind of dumb, but whatever, it is what it is. It's not that powerful of hardware. Not even close to as powerful as this. Series S games are pretty much all 30 these days. Even Series X and PS games are often locked to 30 these days. And we're above 30, right? We're at 36. Here, let's just do a quick run. This feels okay, right? Because the lows are fine. The average is, I mean, I would prefer more, but it is what I mean, I could play like this. I wouldn't have a problem. We're not at 30. We're actually above 30. So it doesn't feel nauseating to me. And the lows are fine. Personally, I would just turn it up, but this is 16 watts, right? 17, 16 watts. Come down to 15. This is where it's going to start to get real hairy. Right? At 15 watts, it's just not able to do 30, which is at which point I wouldn't play. I would not play at this. You could, but why? Why would you do it? You had 3 watts and you had 10 FPS. It's way more playable. Now, that being said, it's not going to be in this video because I have a full game testing video coming, like a bunch of them on this thing. I've already tested games like Final Fantasy Tactics, the remake, whatever. And those type of games, HD 2D games from Square, that kind of stuff, or older games, they actually are totally fine at 15 watts. Now, okay, now we'll go lower, but it's not going to lie. It's not good. I don't even think it'll go to 10. I think the chip locks at 13. Yeah, it wouldn't let me go below that. So it's really weird. Like maybe it's just so much draw on it. When I was playing Final Fantasy Tactics, it was fine with 10. This game, it just will not let me do 10. It is like, you are unacceptable to me. I mean, but here's the thing. We're at 12 watts. And we're getting 20 FPS. This is a hard to run game. There are most games are easier to run than this. If you look at games that exist, most of them are easier to run than this.